Yeah, what powerful words at the end, right? We're all connected, and all matters. And this is the next section of our program. Today, it's about values, purpose, and values in action, and with an emphasis on advancing the SDGs, the role of collaborative leadership across academia, business, and government. And before I ask our dear panelists to come on stage, I just give a little introduction and then also introduce them to you. Let me give you a little bit of a background, a rationale why we have this topic there today. We have the Sustainable Development Goals, which provides, of course, as we all know, a shared blueprint for a sustainable and equitable future. But achieving them requires a different type of leadership. And that leadership needs to transcend traditional boundaries, which goes beyond those familiar spaces, going towards collaboration between academia, business, and government. And each system plays a critical role by itself, no question, but only together we achieve systemic change. And without systemic change, we don't achieve anything. I just put it a little bit that bluntly. So how do we align these three entities? And of course, we have academia, generates knowledge, develops talent. In order to be able to drive change, we have businesses which bring innovation, know how to scale something, orchestrate things. And then we have government, which also is there to enable policy environments and much, much more. Yet there are different priorities sometimes, and that can be challenging. And the question is, how do we bring this together? So in this high-level thought leadership dialogue, we want to explore this and, get to the question, how can we accelerate the SDG progress? We have 4.5 years left. There will be a life after 2030, we know that. But the question is, what type of a life are we going to have increasingly? And then, of course, we do have leadership approaches, different types of leadership approaches. The field of leadership is, in terms of recorded history, around 180 years old and has gone through a lot of things, right, until today. So the question is, what does it mean? And then also partnership models. So this is something we want to talk about. And the idea is really to develop a deeper understanding how we can advance the SDGs. Really, that's what we want to do. Something which is also important is to address the topic of sustainability. It will be reflected in the questions I will ask and the discussions which we're going to have in a minute. And of course, also the topic of social impact. What does impact actually really mean? We use this term very often, right? Does X have impact? Does Y have impact? But what does it really mean? And in the course of the last 1.5 years, I'm realizing that there are different definitions of it, and maybe we can shed a bit of light to that too. Having said so, I would like to warmly welcome our speakers, which is first His Excellency Ambassador Jabesh Monari, Deputy Permanent Representative and of the Permanent Mission of Kenya to the United Nations, also in New York. Welcome to stage. We have, or actually plan to have also Ms. Ligia Noranha, UN Assistant Secretary General, Head of the New York Office of the United Nations Environmental Program. On short notice, she can't be here because of another duty she couldn't not do, but instead we have Mrs. Isabella Maras, Senior Program Manager in charge of the interagency affairs of the UNEP, the environmental program. Welcome to stage, New York. And our third panelists, which you just saw earlier, Ms. Chigosirim, going after Chichi Bodard, Chief of Staff of the United Nations Global Compact. Welcome, warm welcome to you as well. Wonderful. So, yes, another mic. Everyone has a mic. Okay, that's good. So, let me introduce our very special panelists. Very happy to have you here, really. Thank you for making time to come. By first introducing them a little bit more, because I think it's very interesting what they have to bring to this panel. We have His Excellency Ambassador Jabesh Oreni Monari. He's, as I said, currently serving as the Deputy Permanent Representative at the Kenya Permanent Mission of the United Nations here in New York since recently, March. He graduated with a Master of Business Administration in Strategic Management. Dear colleague, that's good. From Kenyatta University in 2014, holds postgraduate diploma in international relations at the University of Nairobi, then a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Nairobi, and complemented by various professional courses in leadership and diplomacy. Prior to his appointment, he served as the inaugural Secretary for Foreign Service Administration Management from November 23 to March 25 in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs headquarters, and even previously held key positions in foreign affairs, Director of the Africa and African Union, including administration, and in various directorates, among them the Americas and the Caribbean, Europe and the Commonwealth, Middle East, and the UN Habitat. He's a seasoned diplomat with 24 years of service as a foreign service officer, including extensive international experience with postings as Deputy Head of Mission and Head of Chancery. Then I move on to the back of our round first, so sort of Chichi Bodard, Chief of Staff. She is responsible for strategically leading the UN Global Compact Board's relations and United Nations partnerships and the principles of responsible management education initiative. She also leads the front office operations, internal executive management coordination, and the administrative operations of the UN Global Compact, working closely with the UN Executive Office of the Secretary General and with the Foundation for the Global Compact. Prior to joining, she held several leadership roles at the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, including serving as the acting chief of staff, where she provided strategic and thought leadership, improved policy coordination, strengthened partnerships, increased operational effectiveness, and enhanced the ECA's visibility through multiple platforms and interventions. Education-wise, she actually, I should mention that, it's very important, served also as policy and advocacy specialist at the United Nations Population Fund, called the UNFPA, where she actually contributed to program development, stakeholder engagement, resource mobilization. And before joining the United Nations, she worked in government service, notably as a public health manager within the UK National Health Service, with the private sector, public sector, academic institutions. She was there as well, and also with non-governmental organizations in various capacities, and also as a trustee for several charity organizations. She holds a Master in Public Policy and Management from the University of Manchester, Master of Science, Public Health from the Liverpool John Moores University, and a Bachelor of Engineering in Medical Electronics from the University of Liverpool. And so again, welcome. It's really very rich, and I'm looking forward to our discussions. And then I also have something to say about Mrs. Maras, Isabella Maras, Senior Program Manager in charge of interagency affairs in the UNEP New York office. She's responsible for UNEP interagency cooperation at the global level, with particular focus on UN system-wide policy, coherence, and reform. And she supports the coordination between the New York office, the UN entities in New York, and the UNEP's headquarters. She is Italian, has a master's degree in environmental law from the Sapienza University of Rome, and her 20 plus years in the United Nations worked on sustainability, production, consumption, environmental education, lifestyles, sustainable events, environment management systems, and urban environment. Prior to that, she initiated the sustainable procurement work at UNEP and the UNEP UNESCO Youth Exchange Project on sustainable lifestyles for young people. She worked on education for sustainable lifestyles in 2006 and also the Sustainable UN Coordination leading to success, the UN system greening of the Blue Initiative. Some of you may know she was involved there as well for a long time here in this field. So having explained a little bit what the background of our panelists are, there are a few questions which I've prepared, and I think it would be good to directly go into them. And these questions, maybe I can start with you, Your Excellency, with a question concerning this topic of government leadership, since this is a field which you have a lot of experience, and how it works together when we talk about partnerships with the private sector, with the public sector. And here, with the multilateral system under strain and key reform efforts underway, the question is, how can actually academic institutions and the private sector help restore trust and legitimacy in global cooperation? And what kind of partnerships do you believe are most needed now, at this time, to move the SDGs forward?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Omet. Let me begin by conveying my appreciation for the invitation to participate in the 2025 PRME Global Forum. It is a privilege to join you here at this beautiful Cornell Technical Campus and to be part of this distinct panel. I actually feel like I need to pursue PhD around here. Once you are in this room, it gives you a comfort. I ask my colleague Ronnie if we can work around starting up something. It's always good to enrich your mind. We are encouraged to see the continued expansion of the PRME chapter Africa, and Kenya is proud to be represented with the PRME community by Strathmore University, and an institution whose leadership in ethical business education continues to inspire everyone. Turning back to your question, I will offer my reflection in two parts. First, I will address the state of multilateral system and the rationale of the reform efforts underway. And two, I will seek to address the role of academic institutions and the private sector in rebuilding trust and accelerating SDGs progress at this critical juncture. Over the last 8 decades, as you are aware, in coming weeks, we will be celebrating 80 years of the UN. The United Nations has shepherded a period of unprecedented global development. Amid the current feasible strains on the multilateral system, it is easy to overlook the historic gains made in areas such as health, education, infrastructure, technological progress, among others, which are largely attributable to the rules-based international order that has always been underpinned by the UN. Yet, despite these gains, many developing countries, particularly in Africa, continue to grapple with persistent poverty, diverse economic challenges, including debt distress, and varied and intersecting forms of structural inequality. In far too many places, conflict, displacement, and climate vulnerability are reversing hard-won development progress. Indeed, pertinent to our discussion today, we must confront the sobering truth that only 17% of the SDG targets are currently on track. And nearly a half show minimal or no progress at all, while several are in litigation. There is no progress at all. It is in recognition of these prevailing circumstances and in response to growing calls for institutional renewal that the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, launched his UN8 initiative, a timely reform initiative that will explore structural reforms across the UN system as a whole to make it more efficient, responsive, and more effective. Kenya, as a firm believer in multilateralism and as a host of the United Nations office at Nairobi, one of the 4 main UN global headquarters and the only one in the global south, intends to play an active role in this reform process with the aim of safeguarding the needs, perspectives, and aspirations of the global south. So then, on your question of what kind of partnerships are most needed now to move the SDG forward, my response in this will be that academic institutions are a unique and indispensable role, have a unique and indispensable role in the future of development partnerships. As the PRME community demonstrates, academia is not only the key engine of knowledge generation, it is also the primary incubator of innovation, talent, ethical leadership, long-term thinking, and civic responsibility. Academia must therefore remain among the key architects shaping the revitalized multilateral order. This is the only way to ensure that the emergent system after the reforms is grounded in evidence-based research and knowledge, and that the new model benefits from the innovation and energy of the student population. Similarly, the private sector must evolve from the margins to the mainstream of global development. Our conviction remains that the SDGs cannot be achieved without the full involvement of the private sector. Before I conclude, thereby, let me emphasize the importance of fully implementing our SDG 17 commitments on strengthening the means of implementation and revitalizing the global partnership for sustainable development. Whether we sit in the government, business, academia, or civil society, we all have a role to play. Delivering on the SDGs will require not only better financing and better policies, but also stronger trust, coordination, and collective accountability across all actors. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so true. This special this emphasis on the force of business and the collaboration of these two partners. And that's actually something which I would like to ask Chichi in terms of your experiences and very rich experiences in the past, but also your current role, um, right in the heart of United Nations Global Compact. The compact bridges the UN and the private sector. And, you know, what have you seen in terms of leadership behaviors or leadership models, we can say, where you would say they are most effective in turning UN goals into corporate action, things which are playing on the ground, which are basically happening on the ground? What would be your take on that?
No, thank you. Thank you very much, Ahmed. I think it's a really important question. And it's something that forms the core of what we do. We were established to bring businesses, to bring a human face to business, to bring businesses to the table, because ultimately the Sustainable Development Goals are not about countries adopting it. They're about our shared values. And in that, everybody has a role to play. And so one of the most important things that we find, and it has become even more true today, is leaders with a deep sense of purpose. Nothing can be more important than that. And what does that mean? It means that it's not necessarily about, and I think we've seen some of this lately, it's not necessarily about issues of sustainability or issues of sustainable development goals as one part of the corporate priority. It's about the business culture. It's how do you organically form a culture within corporate world, within business, that imbibes issues of society, that imbibes the humanity part of what we're trying to deal with, that imbibes also a sense of accountability, quite frankly, to people and planet. And so it's not something that's just done one-off. So it's basically, when you look at the totality of your processes within the systems, within your business systems, how do you ensure that you move the dial forward on issues of sustainability wherever and however that you can, whether it's about inclusivity, whether it's about your climate targets within your procurement processes, whether it's about your HR systems? What is the message that as a leader you convey so that it's a collective action and it's not a top-down and it's an all-of system? I think what is happening around us today in the world requires boldness and also a little bit of putting your head out there, quite frankly, and hoping that you will have, the masses with you a little bit. There is boldness. There is also the recognition that, like it or not, public and private have to work together. CSOs and governments have to work together. CSOs, government, private sector have to work together. And so how do we create spaces where we understand each other's language? So that, how do we, in our role in the United Nations, prepare that multi-stakeholder platform? Because we are the connections to civil society. We are the connections to government. We are the connections to the private sector. It is possible that when you get to the national level, those conversations may not happen because people don't, well, sectors don't understand each other. And that's where we come in, to be able to recognize, articulate, present, and influence the platforms such that everybody, every sector is clear of what their role is on there. And I think, leaders who succeed on this have business models such as that. And they do exist, leaders who genuinely believe that, sustainability isn't a tick box exercise, who actually believe that profit and ethics shouldn't be, it shouldn't be an either or, who actually believe that imbibing sustainability as a culture makes the company or business more competitive on that. I think the last point I want to make is just talking a little bit about the for some of the work that we do, we try to also underpin this with some analysis, as you would know. So we undertook some recent survey with Reynolds Russell on, what kinds of leaders, what are the kinds of attributes that such leaders need to have to be successful. And I think there are 4 buckets that came up. There's multi-level systems thinking. So it's about business, society, and planet all together. It's about stakeholder influence. Now, this is not necessarily about convincing somebody to do something. It's about co-creating. It's about making business priorities relevant to the people that they serve, such that it's a two-way street. There's also disruptive innovation. So part of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, I think we have learned. You will hear the statistics over and over again. 5 years to go. We are less than 25%. But we've also seen the power of technology. We've seen the power of AI now. AI, we are now at the point where we need to ensure that AI is doing good more than it's going to do bad. However, what we have seen over the last decade is that we can, with intention, we can leapfrog progress on many fronts. And this is what disruptive innovation is about. And then there is the long-term activation. So how do we support leaders who stay the course? So you start on your sustainability journey. You're not necessarily, it's not about profit just yet. You're not quite breaking even, but we believe on the goals. And what is it that we need to do to ensure that leaders stay the course because they believe that this is the right thing to do. It's good business, it's responsible business, but it's also competitive business. Thanks.
Absolutely great points. Thank you very much. And, as someone who was 22 years in a professor, still am, but not employed as a professor, one wants to continue discussing that, isn't it? Do you feel the same way, or wants to get right into and get into further down? So that's what the panel is really about, to create an appetite for that, so that in these 2 days we can also continue talking about it. But this topic you mentioned, sustainability, and I would like to move to Isabella Maras concerning the question of sustainability, actually, in such a way that I would like to ask you, how can actually academia and business support government-led sustainability efforts or sustainability transitions beyond simply responding to policy and taking this notion of co-creation to co-create solutions through it? What is your take on that? What are your experiences? How can that be done?
Thank you. Do you hear me? Yes. First of all, my apologies on behalf of Ligia Noronha. As the ambassador mentioned, UN is going through a lot at the moment, and sometimes you're not in full control of our agenda. But thank you for having me here. A few things that I wanted to mention have been mentioned earlier by Amina Mohammed and many of the speakers. We do live in a moment of great disruptions. There is technological disruption, with AI and all the positive things it can bring. There is also, especially for young people, a sense of fear, given that all the explorations that research of businesses are doing on making things more efficient could also bring some loss of, first jobs and the type of research and actions that more typically young people do at the early part of their career, and that builds their capacities as they evolve. So we are having this. We're having, as everybody imagines, I'm going to speak about the ecological disruptions. 2024 called the hottest year in history. Extreme weather events everywhere in the world, and that also brings to a sense of causality between extreme weather events and conflict and displacements of people. We are talking about 800 thousand people having been displaced because of extreme weather events just last year. We are in a phase, and I'm not going to dwell into this, of political disruptions, many changes in that front, and polarized views that are opposing each other in the world. And that has an impact on society, with inequalities having risen dramatically, and multilateralism at risk. So in this very negative picture, how do we turn these disruptions into opportunities? It's a moment of change. What can we bring forward? What can we learn from the change, and and how can we rethink our development models and our definition of progress and well-being? And this is where business and academia, and of course governments and UN, but in particular business and academia, have a great role to play here. They bring collective intelligence. We've heard it. They bring innovation, power to influence decision makers, both sectors, and they can help reshape development models. In UNEP, we have an initiative that federates also academia, governments, and business, called International Resource Panel. Everybody knows about the IPCC, and both they point to a stronger focus on how we live. We're talking about business, but business provides people you know, the things we need to live, the infrastructure we need to live. And so what defines the quality of everybody's lives in this part of the world and in other parts of the world? These are fundamental questions that both business and academia can help think about. Academia has a vast power of change. It can provide system thinking that was mentioned, the data, but also the human-centered insight. We often think about technologies, but social science, it's a science. And sometimes we don't look enough at people and what are the aspirations of people? How can we explain about sustainability to people that have are on the brink of poverty and involve them in that? So my message for today is to embrace complexity. We do not live in a linear economic world anymore. We don't live in a simple world anymore. It's a complex world. And when you have complex problems, you need to look at them from different sides. And that's where our discussion has a place. With different sides, different solutions. And one of the points that I was thinking about when we were looking at the concept of leadership, for me, maybe it's a UN angle, it also echoes the concept of leave no one behind. We are looking at leadership, but leadership is also about bringing people with you and do not leave them behind. Having done that, having maybe left some people behind, is one of the causes of the disruptions that we are looking at nowadays. So that could also be an angle when we think about leadership that is worth exploring. I have a lot more to say. Finish here.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, I have a second round of questions, but I will keep the second round of questions a little bit shorter because I also want to ask into the audience whether there are questions there, and pick one, two, if you have time, even three questions. But that's now very interesting because we talked about, you just talked about the different perspectives. One key perspective, it was mentioned 3 times today already, is the term youth. So we know, I just, say that like that because I think it's the way it is. So I say we know that without the youth, we cannot accelerate anything. We need the young generations for that. Therefore, the place which stands for young people is Africa. So Africa is has a very youthful population, a very dynamical entrepreneurial sectors. It's breathtaking, it's amazing, untapped potential. Many countries. Question to you, Ambassador: how can governments and multilateral institutions actually better partner with businesses in order to actually localize the SDGs and drive development across the continent, keeping in mind the power of young people?
Thank you. Thank you again. The demographic trends indeed make one thing abundantly clear, that the future of the world's youth is African. Africa is young, vibrant, and full of promise. It's estimated that by 2050, the sub-Saharan Africa will account for 1/3 of the global youth population, up from 19% in 2015. Over the next 3 decades, Africa is projected to gain more than 500 million young people, while the youth population in the rest of the world is expected to decline. One of the most critical areas requiring urgent attention is the global financing of development architecture. I say this with the upcoming 4th International Conference on Financing for Development, which will take place later this month in Spain. Without the global financial architecture being reformed to be friendly to developing countries, the SDGs or any kind of development will be slowed down. And in essence, it will also slow down youth getting involved in development. Traditional SDGs financing models build largely around government-to-government aid, concessional loans, and multilateral assistance have all proven inadequate in scale and the scope to meet contemporary development challenges. The recent reduction in official development assistance by the traditional Western donors have further strained the international financing landscape. But even before these reductions, the annual financing gap to meet the SDGs stood at estimated $4 trillion. This shortfall has remained the single greatest impediment to the full implementation of Agenda 2030. And it is precisely here that the private sector should come in. The African private sector has largely demonstrated remarkable innovation and the willingness to contribute to the development agenda. One standout example is the Equity Group Foundation model, spearheaded by Dr. James Mwangi, the CEO of Equity Bank. A model that illustrates how integrated investments in education, health, agriculture, and entrepreneurship can transform lives and expand opportunity at scale. It is my hope that you will get to hear more about the Equity Foundation model and other African examples during this forum. It is one of the most transformative models that, if embraced, can transform very many sectors of the economies in Africa. However, despite the welcome effort from African entrepreneurs to date, only around 13% of the private sector investment in emerging markets is aligned to SDGs. That is the most unfortunate thing. This must change, A more enabling ecosystem is urgently needed to embed more African private sector involvement. And in essence, that then will enable the youth to get involved into economic activities. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, the youth, they are not yet sitting at our tables at the same eye height. That's really something which needs to be changed. That's really a big topic. And it goes from the world of macro politics, politics, continental developments, government, down to the lunch tables and dinner tables in our families, right? How do we democratize our conversations, make sure that the youth are there and co-create and co-decide? It's so important, especially in a world which is changing the way it is changing right now, with so much emphasis on experimentation, a skill which young people are very good at. We all were good at some point, right? But we also get into our inroads, and then it becomes a little bit more difficult. So we need the young people. But speaking of, you know, different perspectives again, Chichi, you were talking about the UN Global Compact. You mentioned the topic of co-creation, collaborative leadership. What about the topic of incentives? Maybe we can shed light on this topic. How can we better align incentives between business and academia towards innovation, to achieve and, you know, surpass hopefully SDGs in the future?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Omid. So when I first started this role and got more involved with the work of Prime, I do get very excited with what Prime does, because those who are from public health will understand the conversations around upstream approaches. So I see the Prime initiative as very much an upstream approach to almost sort of future-proof businesses. So right now, a lot of the work that we do in terms of sustainability is around, and the SDGs is really around dealing with a problem that exists now and with a simulated future if we don't take care of it. But with Prime and with more and more institutions as part of it, we are genuinely investing in future-proofing societies, planet, the environment. And so I say this because we can't do it then if we don't have conversations with businesses. We can't do it if we're not clear in the academic world of what businesses might need. It's almost as if we must coexist, intertwined, while still respecting and owning our space. And so that's just elaborating more on that co-creation. And it forces us to think differently, because I think academia is no longer about the theories. I think Chelsea said it. I think Sander and the DSG said it. You know, what is the kind of leadership that we require, and what is the role of academic sector? What is the role of business in that space? When we co-create, we develop curricula that is clear about the offer. We develop curricula that's responsive, that has foresight embedded in it, that takes some essence out of, behavior analysis and all of that. Then I think we get to a space where we are understanding each other as businesses in the academic sector. We recently did an analysis in terms of policy enablers for private sector support to the SDGs. I think the ambassador has talked about the financing of the SDG. It remains a perennial challenge. And why does it matter? You see, the way we teach macroeconomics in university has to change. When in my previous role at ECA, ECA was established, I think, 1958 or 1956. And we're still speaking the same issues. How do you model real life situation that sees beyond the public sector and is able to simulate the role of other sectors within that model to begin to get close to enough of something that we can all understand. So I think the report that we did was looking at private sector financing, and we were able to work with some educators at the prime of some of our prime institutions. And we produced a really good report that is context specific. There were some case studies across 5 countries, came up with some practical recommendations that all stakeholders can relate to. So I think that's one example of co-creation, but also recognition and incentive. It's important for business because they have the information, it's real to them, it's in language that they understand. It's important for us because we understand and we can feed that also into the work that we do. The other part of it is around talent and how we build talent in terms of, so not just the standard brilliance anymore of linear a linear intelligence in terms of, subject matter specific, talent in a manner that understands the entirety. I think Chelsea put it nicely. How do you learn in the academic sector and still learn in the environment that you exist? So talent that is able to connect societal, planet, environment, and all of that together. And I think that's the sort of thing that businesses are looking for. That's the sort of thing that we should be offering businesses, quite frankly. So we're not having a retrospective conversations about, oh, the planet is burning up. Let's see what we can do. Knowing that retrofitting is going to cost us even more money, quite frankly. So how do we sort of start? I keep doing this, but in my mind, it's, how do we start from the beginning? Because we're kind of like in the middle or, 3/4 of it. I think recognition is also important. I think for a long time, at least, when I was in Ethiopia with the UN, for a long time, we've sort of given the private sector a bad rap, and perhaps deservedly so on some levels. But they're a major stakeholder now. And it's important that we create platforms for recognizing the efforts and also sort of supporting them in sort of that in supporting them in spotlighting the successes where they exist. On our board, we have board members who are deeply committed to the values that we stand for, not just by talk, who demonstrate it and who are willing to say to you, no, actually, that this is the only business model that works for us. And so how do we recognize those? And I think it's, in conclusion, it really is about mutual capacity building, recognizing, that academia and the businesses around innovation and the SDGs, everybody has something to offer, but there might be gaps, and how do we sort of work together to plug those gaps in a manner that is helpful towards the SDGs? Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And maybe I can, Isabella, can I ask you a short question? Because we're talking about what is happening, maybe an example, how at UNEP, how is collaborative leadership being practiced? If you could maybe just
Quickly
describe. Yeah.
Yes. UNEP is a small UN entity, one of the really small ones. So collaborative leadership, collaboration, multi-stakeholder discussions I've been in UNEP for 20 years, and it's the way we have survived so far. Working especially, we were at the beginning with the Global Compact discussions, and so that's in our genes. As an entity that brings data, foresight, and system thinking, we try to show, and that refers to what you were mentioning, Chichi, that shows what is the connection between environment and development, so that you don't get to the connection between development, that, oops, this is what happened to the environment. Our economic models are all based on resources. Resources come from the planet. Ensuring people and young people understand this connection as they enter a business school or as they enter any educational institution from the very beginning is really fundamental. So UNEP, to get to this, collaborates with academia in the area of the education. We have a number of programs that from small children to young people that enter the workforce, address environmental education. We also work with businesses. Where I think we could be doing better is this connection, right? The three connection between academia, business, and the UN maybe. So that's an open offer to to talk more about this, about collaborations. But in practice, let me give you 3 examples. We have a project with other 2 UN agencies, ILO and UNICEF, that is called Green Jobs for Youth Pact. Many people might be aware that there is actually a lot of demand on green jobs and not so much offer. From the academia. And in many UN conferences, I heard young people asking to be trained in green skills so that they get those jobs that are out there and are available. So this initiative looks at that. We have a few observatories in Africa and in Latin America. And it's a collaborative effort. We also collaborate with academia and business when it comes to knowledge and understanding on what is green economy and circularity. That's a GGKP, Green Growth Knowledge Partnership, very difficult acronym, which we co-host and really creates knowledge about the connections that Chichi was mentioning. And from the very beginning, UNEP has always worked with the finance sector and with banking and insurance companies. So we are familiar with working across sectors to promote circularity, to act on evidence, where we should, as I said, what we are thinking at the moment very openly in UNEP, as we are looking at our next 4 years of strategic planning, is how to bring better people in our work. As a science organization, we have this assumption that people know what happens, to the environment, therefore they'll make good decisions. It doesn't work like this. This is where behavioral science and academia can help us understand how how do we work from, I know this thing, and I act differently. It's really important, and that's where we see the connections. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now we are on time, but this means that my suggestion would be if there are someone has a question. Yeah, here we are. So let's take 2 questions. 1 question. No, Chance is no question. So what if we, so we are again at 0 question, but maybe we can use the break afterwards for asking your questions directly to the panelists. I hope we all stay around for a little bit. So please, my apologies, we can't take questions at this time. I just close with one thought only, and that is that, and that's something which goes, because we have champions here, right? And we have a lot of champions. And how can we make collaboration, cross-sector collaboration work? And one idea is really, let us think, there are many young people, but I always say there also, all of us can be young-minded people, right? And we all, who is young-minded here? Let's see, yes, here we are. So I think with this attitude of experimenting and reaching out across the aisles to maybe partners which we are not so, used to work with. We have heard of them, we don't know how to do it, etc. Let's, give it a strong try, collective try, all of us, when we think and reflect on it, how can we actually reach out and create collaboration across the traditional boundaries which we are used to do. Okay, so that would be one idea. And with that, I close. Thank you very much to the panelists again and for your audience. Thank you.